Chapter 13. The Bab's Incarceration in the Castle of MAH-KU. Sayyid Hussein-i Yazdi has been heard to relate the following. During the first 10 days of the Bab's incarceration in Tabriz, no one knew what would next befall him. The wildest conjectures were current in the city. One day I ventured to ask him whether he would continue to remain where he was, or would be transferred to still another place. "Have you forgotten?" was his immediate reply. "The question you asked me in Isfahan. For a period of no less than 9 months we shall remain confined in the Jabal-i-Basit, from whence we shall be transferred to the Jabal-i-Shadid. Both these places are among the mountains of Kui, and are situated on either side of the town bearing that name." 5 days after the Bab had uttered this prediction, orders were issued to transfer him and me to the castle of MAH-KU, and to deliver us into the custody of Ali Khan-i Makui. A footnote says of the Jabal-i-Basit, literally the open mountain, allusion to MAH-KU. The numerical value of Jabal-i-Basit is equivalent to that of MAH-KU, and for the Jabal-i-Shadid, literally the grievous mountain, allusion to Chirik. The numerical value of Jabal-i-Shadid is equivalent to that of Chirik. The castle, a solid 4-towered stone edifice, occupies the summit of a mountain at the foot of which lies the town of MAH-KU. The only road that leads from it passes into that town, ending at a gate which adjoins the seat of government and is invariably kept closed. This gate is distinct from that of the castle itself. Situated on the confines of both the Ottoman and Russian empires, this castle has been used, in view of its commanding position and strategic advantages, as a center for reconnoitering purposes. The officer in charge of that station observed, in time of war, the movements of the enemy, surveyed the surrounding regions, and reported to his government such cases of emergency as came under his observation. The castle is bounded on the west by the river Araxes, which marks the frontier between the territory of the Shah and the Russian Empire. To the south extends the territory of the Sultan of Turkey, the frontier town of Bayazid being at a distance of only 4 farsangs from the mountain of MAH-KU. The frontier officer in charge of the castle was a man named Ali Khan. The residents of the town are all Kurds and belong to the Sunni sect of Islam. A footnote here says, "He dwells in a mountain of which the inhabitants could not even pronounce the name Jannat, paradise, which is an Arabic word. How then could they understand its meaning? Imagine then what can happen in the matter of the essential truths." From the Persian Bayan, Volume 4, page 14. The Shias, who constitute the vast majority of the inhabitants of Persia, have always been their avowed and bitter enemies. These Kurds particularly abhor the Sayyids of the Shia denomination, whom they regard as the spiritual leaders and chief agitators among their opponents. Ali Khan's mother being a Kurd, the son was held in great esteem and was implicitly obeyed by the people of MAH-KU. They regarded him as a member of their own community and placed the utmost confidence in him. Haji Mirza Akazi had deliberately contrived to relegate the Bab to so remote, so inhospitable, and dangerously situated in a corner of the territory of the Shah, with the sole purpose of stemming the tide of his rising influence and of severing every tie that bound him to the body of his disciples throughout the country. Confident that few, if any, would venture to penetrate that wild and turbulent region occupied by so rebellious a people, he fondly imagined that this forced seclusion of his captive from the pursuits and interests of his followers would gradually tend to stifle the movement at its very birth, and would lead to its final extinction. He was soon made to realize, however, that he had gravely mistaken the nature of the revelation of the Bab, and had underrated the force of its influence. The turbulent spirits of this unruly people were soon subdued by the gentle manners of the Bab, and their hearts were softened by the ennobling influence of his love. Their pride was humbled by his unexampled modesty, and their unreasoning arrogance mellowed by the wisdom of his words. Such was the fervour which the Bab had enkindled in those hearts, that their first act every morning was to seek a place whence they could catch a glimpse of his face, where they could commune with him and beseech his blessings upon their daily work. In cases of dispute, they would instinctively hasten to that spot, and, with their gaze fixed upon his prison, would invoke his name and adjure one another to declare the truth. Ali Khan several times attempted to induce them to desist from this practice, but found himself powerless to restrain their enthusiasm. He discharged his functions with the utmost severity, and refused to allow any of the avowed disciples of the Bab to reside, even for one night, in the town of MAH-KU. And a footnote here says, "Oh, how great is your blindness, O my children! That which you do believing to please me. And in spite of these verses which prove my being, these verses which flow from my power, the treasure of which is the very being of this personage, the Bab, in spite of these verses which come from his lips, only by my permission, behold that, without any right whatsoever, you have placed him on the summit of a mountain whose inhabitants are not even worthy of mention. Close to him, which is close to me, there is no one except one of the letters of the living of my book. In his hands, which are my hands, there is not even a servant to light the lamp at night. And behold, the men who are upon the earth have been created only for his own existence. It is through his good will that has come all their joy, and they do not give him even a light." Vahid 2, Bab 1. The fruit of the religion of Islam is faith in the manifestation of the Bab, and behold, they imprison him in MAH-KU, Vahid 2, Bab 7. All that belongs to the divinely chosen one is in heaven. This solitary room wherein I am, which has not even a door, is today the greatest of the gardens of paradise, for the tree of truth is planted therein. All the atoms of which it is composed cry out, "In truth there is no other God but God, and there is no other God beside me, the Lord of the universe." Vahid 2, Bab 16. The fruit of this door is that men, seeing that it is permitted to do all that for the bayan, that is, spend so much money, which is only the foreshadowing of him whom God shall make manifest, must realize what should be done for him whom God shall make manifest when he will appear, so that he will be spared what is happening to me on this day. That is to say, that there are throughout the world many Qur'ans worth thousands of tumans, while he who has showered verses, the Bab, is imprisoned on a mountain, in a room built of bricks baked in the sun. And notwithstanding, that room is the arch itself, that is the ninth heaven, the abode of divinity. Let this be an example to the Bayanis, so that they may not act toward him as the believers in the Quran have acted towards me. Vahid 3, Bab 19, from A.L. Nicholas's Syed Ali Muhammad Dit le Bab, pages 365 to 7. All believe in him, and they still have imprisoned him on a mountain. All are made glad in him, and they have abandoned him. No fire is fiercer for those who have acted thus in their very works. Likewise for the believers, no heaven is higher than their own faith. From the Persian Bayan, volume. For the first 2 weeks, Syed Hussein further related, no one was permitted to visit the Bab. My brother and I alone were admitted into his presence. Syed Hassan would every day, accompanied by one of the guards, descend to the town and purchase our daily necessities. Sheikh Hassan Izanuzi, who had arrived at MAH-KU, spent the nights in a masjid outside the gate of the town. He acted as an intermediary between those of the followers of the Bab who occasionally visited MAH-KU and Syed Hassan, my brother, who would in turn submit the petitions of the believers to their master and would acquaint Sheikh Hassan with his reply. One day the Bab charged my brother to inform Sheikh Hassan that he would himself request Ali Khan to alter his attitude towards the believers who visited MAH-KU and to abandon his severity. "Tell him," he added, "I will tomorrow instruct the warden to conduct him to this place." I was greatly surprised at such a message. How could the domineering and self-willed Ali Khan, I thought to myself, be induced to relax the severity of his discipline? Early the next day, The gate of the castle being still closed, we were surprised by a sudden knock at the door, knowing full well that orders had been given that no one was to be admitted before the hour of sunrise. We recognized the voice of Ali Khan, who seemed to be expostulating with the guards, one of whom presently came in and informed me that the warden of the castle insisted on being allowed admittance into the presence of the BAB. I conveyed his message and was commanded to usher him at once into his presence. As I was stepping out of the door of his antechamber, I found Ali Khan standing at the threshold in an attitude of complete submission, his face betraying an expression of unusual humility and wonder. His self-assertiveness and pride seemed to have entirely vanished. Humbly and with extreme courtesy, he returned my salute and begged me to allow him to enter the presence of the BAB. I conducted him to the room which my master occupied. His limbs trembled as he followed me. An inner agitation, which he could not conceal, brooded over his face. The BAB arose from his seat and welcomed him. Bowing reverently, Ali Khan approached and flung himself at his feet. "Deliver me," he pleaded, "from my perplexity. I adjure you by the prophet of God, your illustrious ancestor, to dissipate my doubts, for their weight has well nigh crushed my heart. I was riding through the wilderness and was approaching the gate of the town, when, it being the hour of dawn, my eyes suddenly beheld you, standing by the side of the river, engaged in offering your prayer. With outstretched arms and upraised eyes, you were invoking the name of God. I stood still and watched you. I was waiting for you to terminate your devotions, that I might approach and rebuke you for having ventured to leave the castle without my leave. In your communion with God, you seemed so wrapped in worship that you were utterly forgetful of yourself. I quietly approached you. In your state of rapture, you remained wholly unaware of my presence. I was suddenly seized with great fear and recoiled at the thought of awakening you from your ecstasy. I decided to leave you, to proceed to the guards and to reprove them for their negligent conduct. I soon found out, to my amazement, that both the outer and inner gates were closed. They were opened at my request. I was ushered into your presence, and now find you, to my wonder, seated before me. I am utterly confounded. I know not whether my reason has deserted me." The BAB answered and said, "What you have witnessed is true and undeniable. You belittle this revelation, and have contemptuously disdained its author. God the All-Merciful, desiring not to afflict you with his punishment, has willed to reveal to your eyes the truth. By his divine interposition, he has instilled into your heart the love of his chosen one, and caused you to recognize the unconquerable power of his faith." This marvelous experience completely changed the heart of Ali Khan. Those words had calmed his agitation and subdued the fierceness of his animosity. By every means in his power, he determined to atone for his past behavior. "A poor man, Sheikh," he hastily informed the BAB, "is yearning to attain your presence. He lives in a masjid outside the gate of MAH-KU. I pray you that I myself be allowed to bring him to this place, that he may meet you. By this act I hope that my evil deeds may be forgotten, so that I may be enabled to wash away the stains of my cruel behavior towards your friends." His request was granted, whereupon he went straightway to Sheikh Hassan Izunuzi and conducted him into the presence of his master. Ali Khan set out, within the limits imposed upon him, to provide whatever would tend to alleviate the rigor of the captivity of the BAB. At night, the gate of the castle was still closed. In the daytime, however, those whom the BAB desired to see were allowed to enter his presence, were able to converse with him, and to receive his instructions. As he lay confined within the walls of the castle, he devoted his time to the composition of the Persian Bayan, the most weighty, the most illuminating and comprehensive of all his works. In it he laid down the laws and precepts of his dispensation, plainly and emphatically announced the advent of a subsequent revelation, and persistently urged his followers to seek and find him whom God would make manifest, warning them lest they allow the mysteries and illusions in the bayan to interfere with their recognition of his cause. I have heard Sheikh Hassan Izanuzi bear witness to the following. The voice of the Bab, as he dictated the teachings and principles of his faith, could be clearly heard by those who are dwelling at the foot of the mountains. The melody of his chanting, the rhythmic flow of the verses which streamed from his lips, caught our ears and penetrated into our very souls. Mountain and valley re-echoed the majesty of his voice. Our hearts vibrated in their depths to the appeal of his utterance. There is a footnote. This is the prayer which the Bab himself quotes in the Dalail-i-Sabi as his supplication during the month of his captivity in the castle of MAH-KU. O my God, grant to him, to his descendants, to his family, to his friends, to his subjects, to his relatives, and all the inhabitants of the earth, the light which will clarify their vision and facilitate their task. Grant that they may partake of the noblest works here and hereafter. In truth, nothing is impossible to thee. O my God, give him the power to bring about a revival of thy religion, and give life by him to what thou hast changed in thy book. Manifest through him thy new commandments, so that through him thy religion may blossom again. Put into his hands a new book, pure and holy, that this book may be free from all doubt and uncertainty, and that no one may be able to alter or destroy it. O my God, dispel through thy splendor all darkness, and through his evident power do away with the antiquated laws. By his preeminence ruin those who have not followed the ways of God. Through him destroy all tyrants, put an end through his sword to all discord, annihilate through his justice all forms of oppression, render the rulers obedient to his commandments, subordinate all the empires of the world to his empire. O my God, humble everyone who desires to humble him, destroy all his enemies, deny anyone who denies him, and confuse anyone who spurns the truth, resists his orders, endeavors to darken his light and blot his name. The Bab then adds these words: repeat these benedictions often, and, if time to recite them all be lacking, do not fail to say at least the last. Be awake on the day of the apparition of him whom God will make manifest, because this prayer has come down from heaven for him, although I hope no sorrow awaits him. I have taught the believers in my religion never to rejoice over the misfortune of anyone. It is possible, therefore, that at the time of the appearance of the Son of Truth no suffering may fall upon him. The Book of the Seven Proofs, translated by A.L.M. Nicholas, pages 64 to 65. The gradual relaxation of the stern discipline imposed upon the Bab encouraged an increasing number of his disciples from the different provinces of Persia to visit him in the castle of MAH-KU. An unceasing stream of eager and devout pilgrims was directed to its gate through the gentleness and leniency of Ali Khan. After a stay of 3 days, they would invariably be dismissed by the Bab, with instructions to return to their respective fields of service and to resume their labors for the consolidation of his faith. Ali Khan himself never failed to pay his respects to the Bab each Friday and to assure him of his unswerving loyalty and devotion. He often presented him with the rarest and choicest fruit available in the neighborhood of MAH-KU, and would continually offer him such delicacies as he thought would prove agreeable to his taste and liking. In this manner the Bab spent the summer and autumn within the walls of that castle. A winter followed by such exceptional severity that even the copper implements were affected by the intensity of the cold. The beginning of that season coincided with the month of Muharram of the year A.H. 1264, the 9th of December A.D. 1847 to the 8th of January 1848. The water which the Bab used for his ablutions was of such icy coldness that its drops glistened as they froze upon his face. He would invariably, after the termination of each prayer, summon Sayyid Hussein to his presence, and would request him to read aloud to him a passage from the Murikul Kulub, a work composed by the late Haji Mullah Mihdi, the great-grandfather of Haji Mirza Kamaluddin Inaraki, in which the author extols the virtues, laments the death, and narrates the circumstances of the martyrdom of the Imam Hussein. The recital of those sufferings would provoke intense emotion in the heart of the Bab. His tears would keep flowing as he listened to the tale of the unutterable indignities heaped upon him, and of the agonizing pain which he was made to suffer at the hands of a perfidious enemy. As the circumstances of that tragic life were unfolded before him, the Bab was continually reminded of that still greater tragedy which was destined to signalize the advent of the promised Hussein. To him, those past atrocities were but a symbol which foreshadowed the bitter afflictions which his own beloved Hussein was soon to suffer at the hands of his countrymen. He wept as he pictured in his mind those calamities which he, who was to be made manifest, was predestined to suffer, calamities such as the Imam Hussein, even in the midst of his agonies, was never made to endure. A footnote here says, during his sojourn at MAH-KU, the Bab composed a great number of works, amongst the more important of which may be especially mentioned the Persian Bayan and the Seven Proofs, Dala'il-i-Sabi, both of which contain ample internal evidence of having been written at this period. Indeed, if we may credit a statement made in the Tariq-i-Jadid on the authority of Mirza Abdul Wahhab, the various writings of the Bab current in Tabriz alone amounted in all to not less than 1,000,000 verses. From A Traveller's Narrative, Note L, page 274. In one of his writings, revealed in the year AH 1260, the Bab declares the following: "The spirit of prayer which animates my soul is the direct consequence of a dream which I had in the year before the declaration of my mission. In my vision I saw the head of the Imam Hussein, the Sayyidu Shuhada, which was hanging upon a tree. Drops of blood dripped profusely from his lacerated throat. With feelings of unsurpassed delight, I approached that tree, and stretching forth my hands, gathered a few drops of that sacred blood, and drank them devoutly. When I awoke, I felt that the Spirit of God had permeated and taken possession of my soul. My heart was thrilled with the joy of his divine presence, and the mysteries of his revelation were unfolded before my eyes in all their glory." No sooner had Muhammad Shah condemned the Bab to captivity amid the mountain fastnesses of Azerbaijan than he became afflicted with a sudden reverse of fortune, such as he had never known before, and which struck at the very foundations of his state. Appalling disaster surprised his forces that were engaging in maintaining internal order throughout the provinces. The standard of rebellion was hoisted in Khorasan, and so great was the consternation provoked by that rising that the projected campaign of the Shah to Herat was immediately abandoned. Haji Mirza Akaz's recklessness and prodigality had fanned into flame the smouldering fires of discontent, had exasperated the masses, and encouraged them to stir up sedition and mischief. The most turbulent elements in Khorasan that inhabited the regions of Kushan, Burjnurd, and Shiravan leagued themselves with the Salah, son of the Asifud-Dawleh, the elder maternal uncle of the Shah and governor of the province, and repudiated the authority of the central government. Whatever forces were dispatched from the capital met with immediate defeat at the hands of the chief instigators of the rebellion. Jafar Quli Khan Inamdar and Amir Arslan Khan, son of the Salah, who conducted the operations against the forces of the Shah, displayed the utmost cruelty, and, having repulsed the attacks of the enemy, mercilessly put their captives to death. Mullah Hussein was at the time residing at Mashhad, and was endeavoring, despite the tumult which that revolt had occasioned, to spread the knowledge of the new revelation. No sooner had he discovered that the Salah, in his desire to extend the scope of the rebellion, had determined to approach him and obtain his support, and he promptly decided to leave the city in order to avoid implicating himself in the plots of that proud and rebellious chief. In the dead of night, with only Kambar Ali as his attendant, he proceeded on foot in the direction of Tehran, from which place he was determined to visit Azerbaijan, where he hoped to meet the Bab. His friends, when they learned of the manner of his departure, immediately provided whatever would be conducive to the comforts of his long and arduous journey, and hastened to overtake him. Mullah Hussein declined their help. "I have vowed," he said, "to walk the whole distance that separates me from my beloved. I shall not relax in my resolve until I shall have reached my destination." He even tried to induce Kambar Ali to return to Mashhad, but was finally obliged to yield to his entreaty to allow him to act as his servant throughout his pilgrimage to Azerbaijan. On his way to Tehran, Mullah Hussein was enthusiastically greeted by the believers in the different towns through which he passed. They addressed to him the same request and received from him the same reply. I have heard the following testimony from the lips of Akei Kalim. When Mullah Hussein arrived at Tehran, I, together with a large number of believers, went to visit him. He seemed to us the very embodiment of constancy, of piety and virtue. He inspired us with his rectitude of conduct and passionate loyalty. Such were the force of his character and the ardor of his faith, that we felt convinced that he, unaided and alone, would be capable of achieving the triumph of the faith of God. He was, with secrecy, ushered into the presence of Baha'u'llah, and soon after his interview proceeded to Azerbaijan. The night before his arrival at MAH-KU, which was the eve of the 4th Nowruz after the declaration of the mission of the Bab, and which fell in that year, the year AH 1264, AD 1848, on the 13th of the month of Rabi'uth Thani, Ali Khan dreamed a dream. "In my sleep," he thus relates his story, "I was startled by the sudden intelligence that Muhammad, the Prophet of God, was soon to arrive at MAH-KU, that he was to proceed directly to the castle in order to visit the Bab, and to offer him his congratulations on the advent of the Nowruz festival. In my dream I ran out to meet him, eager to extend to so holy a visitor the expression of my humble welcome. In a state of indescribable gladness, I hastened on foot in the direction of the river, and as I reached the bridge, which lay at a distance of a maidan from the town of MAH-KU, I saw 2 men advancing towards me. I thought one of them to be the Prophet himself, while the other, who walked behind him, I supposed to be one of his distinguished companions. I hastened to throw myself at his feet, and was bending to kiss the hem of his robe, when I suddenly awoke. A great joy had flooded my soul. I felt as if paradise itself, with all its delights, had been crowded into my heart. Convinced of the reality of my vision, I performed my ablutions, offered my prayer, arrayed myself in my richest attire, anointed myself with perfume, and proceeded to the spot where, the night before in my dream, I had gazed upon the countenance of the Prophet. I had instructed my attendants to saddle 3 of my best and swiftest steeds, and conduct them immediately to the bridge. The sun had just risen when, alone and unescorted, I walked out of the town of MAH-KU in the direction of the river. As I approached the bridge, I discovered, with a throb of wonder, the 2 men whom I had seen in my dream walking one behind the other and advancing towards me. Instinctively I fell at the feet of the one whom I believed to be the Prophet and devoutly kissed them. I begged him and his companion to mount the horses which I had prepared for their entry into MAH-KU. "Nay," was his reply, "I have vowed to accomplish the whole of my journey on foot. I will walk to the summit of this mountain and will there visit your prisoner." This strange experience of Ali Khan brought about a deepening of reverence in his attitude towards the Bab. His faith in the potency of his revelation became even greater, and his devotion to him was vastly increased. In an attitude of humble surrender, he followed Mullah Hussein until they reached the gate of the castle. As soon as the eyes of Mullah Hussein fell upon the countenance of his master, who was seen standing at the threshold of the gate, he halted instantly, and bowing low before him, stood motionless by his side. The Bab stretched forth his arms and affectionately embraced him. Taking him by the hand, he conducted him to his chamber. He then summoned his friends into his presence and celebrated in their company the feast of Nowruz. Dishes of sweetmeats and of the choicest fruits had been spread before him. He distributed them among his assembled friends, and as he offered some of the quinces and apples to Mullah Hussein, he said, "These luscious fruits have come to us from Milan, the Ard-i Janat, and have been specially plucked and consecrated to this feast by Ismullahul Fatik, Muhammad Taqi." A footnote says, of Ard-i Janat, literally the land of paradise. Until that time, no one of the disciples of the Bab but Sayyid Hussein Yazdi and his brother had been allowed to spend the night within the castle. That day, Ali Khan went to the Bab and said, "If it be your desire to retain Mullah Hussein with you this night, I am ready to abide by your wish, for I have no will of my own. However long you desire him to stay with you, I pledge myself to carry out your command." The disciples of the Bab continued to arrive in increasing numbers at MAH-KU, and were immediately and without the least restriction admitted to his presence. One day, as the Bab, in the company of Mullah Hussein, was looking out over the landscape of the surrounding country from the roof of the castle, he gazed towards the west, and, as he saw the Araxes winding its course far away below him, turned to Mullah Hussein and said, "That is the river, and this is the bank thereof, of which the poet Hafiz has thus written, O Zephyr, shouldst thou pass by the banks of the Araxes, implant a kiss on the earth of that valley, and make fragrant thy breath. Hail 1,000 times hail to thee, O abode of Salma! How dear is the voice of thy camel drivers, how sweet the jingling of thy bells! The days of your stay in this country are approaching their end, but for the shortness of your stay we would have shown you the abode of Salma, even as we have revealed to your eyes the banks of the Araxes." By the abode of Salma, the Bab meant the town of Salmaz, which is situated in the neighborhood of Chirik, and which the Turks designate as Salmaz. Continuing his remarks, the Bab said, "It is the immediate influence of the Holy Spirit that causes words such as these to stream from the tongues of poets, the significance of which they themselves are oftentimes unable to apprehend. The following verse is also divinely inspired. Shiraz will be thrown into a tumult. A youth of sugar tongue will appear. I fear lest the breath of his mouth should agitate and upset Baghdad." The mystery enshrined within this verse is now concealed. It will be revealed in the year after Hin. The Bab subsequently quoted this well-known tradition. Treasures lie hidden beneath the throne of God. The key to those treasures is the tongue of poets. He then, one after the other, related to Mullah Hussein those events which must need transpire in the future, and bade him not to mention them to anyone. A footnote here says, in the Dala'il-i-Sabi, the Bab reveals the following. The Hadith Azerbaijan, referring to this matter, says, "The things which will appear in Azerbaijan are necessary for us. Nothing can prevent their occurrence. Remain therefore in your homes, but if you hear that an agitator has appeared, then hasten towards him." And the Hadith continues, saying, "Woe to the Arabs, for the civil war is near." If in speaking these last words the Prophet had intended to refer to his own mission, his statement would have been vain and worthless. From the Books of Seven Proofs, translated by A.L.M. Nicholas, page 47. "A few days after your departure from this place," the Bab informed him, "they will transfer us to another mountain. Ere you arrive at your destination, the news of our departure from MAH-KU will have reached you." The prediction which the Bab had uttered was promptly fulfilled. Those who had been charged to watch secretly the movements and conduct of Ali Khan submitted to Haji Mirza Akazi a detailed report in which they expatiated upon his extreme devotion to his prisoner and described such incidents as tended to confirm their statements. "Day and night," they wrote him, "the warden of the castle of MAH-KU is to be seen associating with his captives in conditions of unrestrained freedom and friendliness. Ali Khan, who obstinately refused to wed his daughter with the heir to the throne of Persia, pleading that such an act would so infuriate the Sunni relatives of his mother that they would unhesitatingly put him and his daughter to death, now, with the keenest eagerness, desires that same daughter to be espoused of the Bab. The latter has refused, but Ali Khan still persists in his entreaty. But for the prisoner's refusal, the nuptials of the maiden would have been already celebrated. Ali Khan had actually made such a request, and had even begged Mullah Hussein to intercede in his behalf with the Bab, but had failed to obtain his consent. These malevolent reports had an immediate influence upon Haji Mirza Akazi. Fear and resentment again impelled that capricious minister to issue a peremptory order for the transference of the Bab to the castle of Shirik. 20 days after Nowruz, the Bab bade farewell to the people of MAH-KU, who, in the course of his 9 months' captivity, had recognized to a remarkable degree the power of his personality and the greatness of his character. Mullah Hussein, who had already, at the bidding of the Bab, departed from MAH-KU, was still in Tabriz, when the news of his master's predicted transference to Shirik reached him. As the Bab bade his last farewell to Mullah Hussein, he addressed him in these words: "You have walked on foot all the way from your native province to this place. On foot you must likewise return until you reach your destination, for your days of horsemanship are yet to come. You are destined to exhibit such courage, such skill and heroism as shall eclipse the mightiest deeds of the heroes of old. Your daring exploits will win the praise and admiration of the dwellers in the eternal kingdom. You should visit on your way the believers of Kui, of Urumiyyi, of Maraghi, of Milan, of Tabriz, of Zanjan and Qazvin, and of Tehran. To each you will convey the expression of my love and tender affection. You will strive to inflame their hearts anew with the fire of the love of the beauty of God. You will endeavor to fortify their faith in his revelation. From Tehran you should proceed to Mazindaran, where God's hidden treasure will be made manifest to you. You will be called upon to perform deeds so great as will dwarf the mightiest achievements of the past. The nature of your task will in that place be revealed to you, and strength and guidance will be bestowed upon you, that you may be fitted to render your service to his cause." On the morning of the 9th day after Nowruz, Mullah Hussein set forth, as bidden by his master, on his journey to Mazindaran. To Kambar Ali the Bab addressed these parting words: "The Kambar Ali of a bygone age would glory in that his namesake has lived to witness a day for which even he," that is a reference to Muhammad, "who was the lord of his lord, sighed in vain, of which he, with keen longing, has spoken, would that my eyes could behold the faces of my brethren who have been privileged to attain unto his day." Chapter 14. Mullah Hussein's journey to